being quite intrigued by the Foggit vehicle sanitizing system, I decided to buy the complete kit as such, and I got one of the little machines, their official Foggit sanitizing machines, to see, is it actually just a cheap smoke machine? And the answer is yes, it is. It's the cheapest of the cheap smoke machine. I wondered if they'd got a standard machine and maybe changed the temperatures, the thermal switch inside to maybe lower the temperature of the core. But in reality, you'll see this got 240C written on it. That's what it is. That's very standard for these smoke machines. So let me open the smoke machine and I'll demonstrate it afterwards, but I shall show you what's inside. So as with most smoke machines, it's got a little sintered brass weight and filter, which just filters the liquid. It's got the captive plastic container, the silicone tubing which had been pressed and shipping so tightly between something that it was actually crimped flat. And if the lid comes off, there are 4 screws holding it on, one in each of these sort of feet here. This is quite neat, by the way. It's just the way they've adapted it to take a standard bottle. So if I lift this off, it reveals the inside is actually a fairly standard smoke machine. Let me go over the components, then I'll show you the schematic. We have the 400 watt aluminium heater block. Something worth noting here, there's no earth connection because this is being treated as a double insulated item, although double insulated usually means there's no exposed metal at all. In reality, the screws that hold the pump on are metal near to the outside. The screws that hold the heater block are here and here. And there's a little feature that's not really intended here that is not so great. Let me bring in the continuity tester. You see, during shipment, when I opened this up, there were little granules of ceramic inside. And at the back of the heater block here, because there's a heater core inside this, ceramic wool, and then the heater itself just pops out the end. But they've just left barely enough space for the ceramic inserts of the heater to go through, and they've kind of snapped in transit. They've bumped and moved. And this isn't so great because if I put the meter continuity tester on the screws outside the case and then just apply a little tiny bit of pressure down there, it shorts the live onto the case. That hardly moved at all. It's just, it is already just on the verge of just touching that because it's free to move. And that is coincidentally going to that thermal fuse, going over, that's the live. That's not good. So not quite as electrically compliant as it could be. Here's the neat thing that I liked. They've sized this little mounting in here to actually take an absolutely industry standard bottle and put it up at the right height. That's quite clever. The pump that pumps the fluid into the heater core is the smallest solenoid pump I've ever seen in one of these. It's tiny. It's minute. It's also got a smaller capillary tube going into the heater core, which is basically inside this metal box is a layer of the insulation material, and then sort of floating freely inside that is the heater core, which is potted in aluminium. And it's basically a U-shaped 400 watt heater element with this capillary tube going in, wrapping around it in a spiral, and then literally just popping out the end. You can see it there. And the idea is that when that heats up to the temperature, which in this case is 204 degrees Celsius, then liquid is pumped into it. It will atomize the liquid. It will cause it to boil very rapidly as soon as it hits that high temperature. The water will shatter the glycol droplets and presumably the disinfectant droplets part, and it will get into an airborne as a cloud of tiny little droplets. In this instance, though, I'm concerned about the thinness of this. This is really small, this pipe, particularly given that traditional smoke machine fluid, they avoid colours. You might get a very light tint, but these are quite strong colours. And there's also the bactericidal agents and the aromas. So colours, aromas, bactericidal agents. It means there's a risk that the stuff is going to precipitate out through sort of effectively being distilled as it goes through that. And it could cause blockage. That said, this is a cheap machine. It's not going to be used for very long periods of time. Ultimately, treat it as a disposable item. There is this other little thermal thing here. It's a 130 degrees Celsius probably a one-shot fuse, thermal fuse, so that if this unit is left on too long, there is a risk that that could trip. If you have one of these, I'd recommend unplugging it between each use and not just leaving it on all the time. The smoke machine has the usual arrangement. It's got a 3-pin XLR connector here for the remote. Interestingly, they've put instead of just soldering wires onto the back, they've got a little circuit board, marshalling board, which is quite nice. But do keep in mind that that is technically referenced to the mains, that 3-pin XLR. You only use the lead that comes with it. Only if you ever decide to modify it or extend it, it must be mains rated cable, and preferably without an earth core, because all the cores are effectively, the 3 cores that are in it are being used as well, basically they're all referenced to the mains. There's not an earth going out as such. You do get versions of this same machine for about £20 to £25 that inclusive, that come with the remote control dongle out the back, and that might be better given that you could stand outside the car and then you could operate the remote control to fog it inside. But I would say just particularly one good thing, it has the standard IEC connector, which means that if you because you're putting this into cars and slamming the door on the cable, there's so many videos, they don't even route it to the point that the door isn't really going to pincer it too much. They just slam the door in the cable. It's good to have replaceable cables, but then the whole machine should be treated as disposable as well. I shall show you the schematic for this. That'd be a good idea. I'll put it out the way. I'll show you the schematic. It came with a European cable, and it came with a UK cable, which seems to have a relatively compliant plug with the proper fuse in it. So you've got at least 2 cables as spares, in the sense you could just put a replacement plug, wherever country, and just replace the plug in one day. That would let you have a complete spare cable on standby. Where is the remote? The remote is here. Let's pop the remote open and take a look inside it. So, little metal thing has attached itself to my magnetic screwdriver. This is the classic remote control, often supplied with these machines. It's got the XLR on the end. Don't extend these with metal XLRs. Just don't use audio cables or anything with it. Only use the cable that came with it, because it's not safe. The XLR, 3-pin XLR, is commonly used in the event industry for microphones and lighting controls, so that's not so great. The inside of this basically has the button. It's got the 2 LEDs. The green LED indicates it's up to temperature. The red LED indicates you're pressing the button, which is slightly pointless. It's very spidery inside. They've used 100k resistors, brown, black, yellow, 1 0 and 4 zeros to give 100,000 ohms. And they've left all the leads on at full length here, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a very simple construction. Let's put this to the side, and I'll bring in the schematic and focus down that. This is where I wouldn't, if I'd thought of this in advance, I would have invited you to choose which flavour I was going to put out, which colour, but it doesn't really matter because you're not going to smell it. Let's zoom back on this. So the arrangement is the usual. We've got a fuse, an incoming fuse built into the IEC connector, but there's also a 5-amp fuse in the plug. We've got the illuminated switch, which has a neon in it, and the switch itself, and that then feeds the heater block. There's the 130 degrees Celsius thermal fuse, then the heater, then the 240 degrees Celsius thermostat. So that heater will just basically maintain roughly about 240 degrees Celsius. Then there's the XLR connectors, 1, 2 and 3 connections, and the pump. And the idea is that because it's effectively connected across this switch, actually it's not in this instance. Does that mean you could use the pump even before it's up to temperature? Usually it's connected just across that. I'm going to have to try that right now. Have I made a mistake in the schematic? Or, hold on, let me just try this. Plug it in, not stick my fingers into it. Get the remote in, not stick my fingers into that either, since it's all 240 volts. Get this connector to actually go in. Oh, there it goes. Remote here, plug it in, keeping my fingers well away from all the electrical connections. Turn it on. Nothing happens, even though it's in the on position. Okay, that's interesting. Have I plugged this in properly? Oh, there it goes. It's a chunky connector. Excellent. No, I'm going to have to redraw that because I've made a mistake there because it's not running even though it's plugged in. Rightio, I shall double check that. One moment, please. And back again. Oh, look, it's just exposed super low. And I was right the first time. It is the correct schematic. What's happening is that because the bottom of the heater is being shunted straight to the neutral by this switch, it means it bypassed the pumps. The pump can only run, this is a common circuit, when this is up to temperature and that switch opens. So if it has to stop to reheat, it will just turn off. That's one advantage that the big, strange, white, big, large, sort of dedicated disinfecting fogger machine had. These resistors, notably the green one for ready. Oh no, that's the one that shows, now which is it? Yeah, this is the one that lights to show it's ready to go. That resistor will actually be dissipating over half a watt of power just because of the way it's working, because these LEDs will actually conduct in the reverse direction as well when they're applied across the mains like that. And that's it. It's a very simple circuit. It really is just a simple fogging machine. So now I have the urge to fill it with an aroma. So I'm going to put this back together and I'm going to choose the blue one for some reason. Which, what flavour is that? It smells vaguely florally is about the way I would describe it. The other one is this one, which smells like pine disinfectant. They said eucalyptus. And this one then again, this lurid pink one, I think it's cherry. I could be wrong. Not sure. It's fruity. I shall fill it up and then show you it going. Not that it's going to be terribly exciting. All you're going to see is a jet of steam and high volume, but I shall be back shortly. It's up to temperature. The flickery little green light is on. I push the button, the red one should light as well. Yes, it does. And it's just like a typical smoke machine. It just puts out that plume of fog out the front, which doesn't smell anything like what the bottle smelled like, but it is just ultimately all show. That's one of the things I've noticed about I'll just put this out the way before I'm tempted to blow even more smoke into the vicinity. One of the things that I've been noting about the car valeting industry is that a lot of it is show. And I don't know how effective this will be, but it will certainly, they claim it is a germ and odour killer. Not much information on the thing. But it says once you've let all the smoke back out after it's been sitting there for a while, that's in the case of vehicles or rooms, let the smoke out, it's now bacteria and disease free, it says. So I wonder what's in this. Now, one of my tests that I'll do for Benzalkonium Chloride, I don't know if it's that scientifically accurate, I would expect it to mousse up quite heavily, and it does. It produces quite a strong, but that's no guarantee this isn't just a strong surfactant mix of another one. They're very cryptic about what's actually in it. Ethoxylated alcohols is all their data sheet says, and it does say that it's up to 10%, the rest is top secret, which it defeats the point of a data sheet, because if you're wanting to fog out theatres and things like this, auditoriums, you'd kind of want to know what's in it before exposing people to it. But certainly, if you do get this for the valeting industry, it'll be absolutely fine for valeting. It'll do exactly what is wanted, in the sense that it will create that big plume of fog inside the vehicle. It will look the part. It will over swamp any odours that were in the vehicle already. I don't know if it gets rid of it in other ways. But I would say treat it as the machine. If on the basis that it's a standard fog machine, you could always get some spares in just in case, particularly if you end up offering this service a lot in these COVID-y type times. But it's one of these things that spare cables and spare machines would probably be a good idea, or just in case you get caught short when the machine craps out. And as I said, I'll make sure a machine like that, you turn it off between uses just to cool down again. Otherwise, that thermal fuse may trip. But that's it. Interesting. I don't know what's in them. Can't really find out what's in them without scientific analysis. But there you go. It's a cheap machine with basically fog fluid and antiseptic agents, and that's about all there is to say. Interesting enough, well worth opening the machine, but you'll be reassured to know that most other machines should do for that, because it's not anything, it doesn't look, it's not modified inside, it's not particularly fancy. This is something that sort of like puzzles me. A lot of the machines, the fog fluids are being sold machines with the benzalkonium chloride in them, but it decomposes above 140 degrees Celsius, and these machines are operating well above 200. So I don't know the situation there. I'm not really sure how much it remains valid as a bactericidal agent. But it'd be interesting to know what's in these. But there we go. Interesting stuff.